whoever our Apter brothers might be.
Tom,
Okay.
I want to give you a little feedback. I tried the link you sent this morning
Uh-huh.
and it told me the host is on another meeting. So then I went to the link from yesterday and that's how I got in. So
Okay.
there's a conflict in there.
Yeah, I caused the conflict and I resolved the conflict. I was, as usual.
Absolution.
Thank you. But as so often happens in confession, I want to give you the whole story and give you too much information. TMI. Basically what happened, of course, I was running a little bit late, but what I often will do is start a kind of a temporary meeting just with myself so that I can see what I'm looking like on the on the screen to be sure that everything is working okay. And then I quit that and then I entered this meeting. So what happened was I was probably on that other sort of like a last minute makeup mirror meeting when you first tried, and then using the link last night, which was the same one, you got on. So that's the explanation.
Got it. May I use this as a pivot? I've had a lot of thought about the sacrament of reconciliation and how some priests are very rigid. Sins are forgiven, go in peace, and that's it.
Yeah.
And others use the confessional more as a counseling opportunity. And you might remember a couple sessions ago, I asked about training for those of you who were ordained, and there wasn't much training of how to be a confessor. Isn't that right?
You're right there. And the training that we had was largely along canonical lines. In other words, the canonical distinctions between mortal and venial sins and the various, to be sure that the confession was valid, what you had to do was be sure that the person confessed the what is it, the nature and the number. Got all of the aspects to distinguish between a mortal sin and a venial sin.
Species.
Yeah. So it was, there was no thought of counseling involved whatsoever at that time.
So if I can be pretty personal, how were you inclined to refer people to find a spiritual director when you were with them in the confessional?
Well, why don't we get into that a little bit later? Because I still want to continue the welcome of Fred back.
Good.
Fred,
Understood.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was very nice.
You had family to get together with?
Yes, we abstained from turkey and everything else. And we had some kind of chicken roll from a Russian deli.
Oh, nifty.
That was nice. It was a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Yeah, good.
It was in good form.
Very good.
It's my daughter and son-in-law and the 3 kids. And I was such a good grandfather that I watched a full movie about Charlie Brown.
Oh.
Which I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, well,
Charlie-
you can probably use them as an example in your class next week.
I hope so. Not that I'm missing words. They have a lot to read. We talk about.
So with Johnny here, tell us again what courses are you teaching right now?
Uh, I was part of a group that were not satisfied with the old way of going through the core courses,
Mhm,
which is a selection from each college, School of Management or School of Arts and Sciences,
mhm,
of courses from the different disciplines
mhm,
that the kids just make up themselves, and it's in no way integrated. And as far as you can tell, almost none of the teachers themselves are liberally educated.
mhm,
And so we set up a new program called Perspectives in Western Culture, which
Hmm.
is a 4-year course. And the 4 parts are first year, taken usually by about 300 to 400 students, is called Perspectives in Western Culture, which goes from the Bible and the Greeks to Nietzsche.
mhm,
And it's a 2-semester course.
mhm,
And every one of the courses are 2 semesters. The second one is Modernism in the Arts,
mhm,
which is a very interesting one because it touches all the different music, painting, architecture, and so forth. So it's a wonderful, if you have a good guy to teach it who understands all those matters,
mhm.
I wouldn't be one. Although I tried it once and found out I wouldn't.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
the third one is Horizons in the New Social Sciences, which is the one I've been teaching because it's so closely connected to my interest in political theology.
Mhm,
And it includes uh, political science, sociology, economics,
mhm,
and that's a mouthful. And
uh-huh,
but we go from Aristotle's ethics through all the moderns, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu,
mm,
etc., up to the modern time.
mhm,
I forgot to say that it also includes law. And
mhm,
so there are foundational texts in law, like the one Abraham Lincoln read, um, the commentary on the law, one of the 2 books they know for sure he read beside the Bible.
mhm,
And um, and so that takes 2 semesters, and we end with Max Weber as a sociologist, but we go through all the different disciplines, those 3 sociology, economics, and law, and political science. So that's a mouthful, but it's also tremendously interesting. And
mhm,
and I found out that when you read, we spent 4 years, a group of us, a judge from the law school who has since gone to Harvard, and a sociologist and an economist. We studied together for 4 years discussing what to do in this course. And eventually we came out with that course. And for 2 years, I also taught this course at the law school.
mhm,
And and it was a so we said we graduated after 4 years. We finally figured out what to do.
uh-huh,
And the idea is basic text in the discipline.
mhm.
And the lawyer, Mary Ann Glendon, a famous Catholic lawyer,
Oh, yeah.
she had to go back to the law school and ask everybody, what are the basic texts in our field?
Mhm,
Oh, so we eventually dredged some up, but still, when you read classics, you keep learning every time you read them,
uh-huh,
and that's, I guess, what's meant by a classic. Um, and so then the 4th thing is math and science, perspectives in math and science. We
mhm,
go from early mathematicians right through modern physics and
mhm,
chemistry.
mhm,
So it's a heck of a thing to go through. And then I also teach a course. It's a seminar of all the seniors who are taking all the courses.
mhm,
And I make up a syllabus,
Mhm.
and we discuss those, the group of seniors who've gone through all 4 years.
Uh-huh.
So as far as we can tell, it's one of the wonderful things at BC now, this Perspectives program.
That sounds
And-
great. I'm looking for, oh, well, never mind.
So next-
I also so noticed Sue kind of in the
Yeah.
background coming and going, wanted to say hi, but I think
Hello
does
to
that-
Sue. Yes,
she's not there right now. I don't think.
She says hello. She's
Good.
behind me on a couch
Oh,
listening,
okay, good, good. So,
and she enjoys it too.
oh,
Okay.
well, terrific. Terrific. And John, how was your Thanksgiving?
it was delightful. I am a bit on a retreat. I have this condo. I'm in Palm Desert,
Mhm.
and it's currently vacant. I had some people that had to leave and some legal issues. And so I came up to meet with a private investigator who turned out to be wonderful
Hmm.
and decided to stay in the quiet. It's on a cul-de-sac and just have a potluck with some locals. So I got a ham and we treated one another. But mostly it was very quiet. And, you know, I've got 4 kids and 11 grandkids and 4 siblings. So lots of internet greetings with that. So
Hmm.
it was nice, but I had lots of quiet. And funny, the night before I stayed up, I'm usually in bed by 10 o'clock. I stayed up till 1 a.m. watching replays of Blue Bloods, which is my TV favorite. And this private investigator that I was referred to is a retired police officer. So it turns out Blue Bloods is her favorite too, because in her opinion, it's quite accurate.
Oh, good.
So that was good. Fred, if I can ask, you've been at this for a while there, and do you have any particular thoughts on how your student body has changed over the years? And I got the impression maybe you've adjusted the curriculum according to your reading of that student body.
Very much so. When I first came to BC, most of the kids were from Catholic families, and very many of them had Catholic grammar school and high school. So they knew people in their family who were very faithful Catholics, even some who they could say seriously prayed. And that was, in a way, kind of smooth sailing because they were interested to have a more theological view of what they had learned in catechism. I must say that probably it's true what Diarmuid Martin, who came and talked to BC after the vote for same-sex marriage in Ireland, who in his talk, he said, the Irish are the most catechized and least evangelized people in the world. And that would be kind of true for these kids.
Uh-huh.
And so you could engage in evangelization during the course. But as time went on, you had fewer and fewer people from either practicing Catholic families, although they were mostly baptized, and who knew anybody who really was a practicing Catholic in a serious way. Not that their parents and families were the spawn of the devil, but they they were good, but they were just not more or less interested in the faith.
Ah,
So that led to even more basic evangelization. So then, starting about 20 years ago, we started to get more and more foreign students. At first, they were South Koreans, most of whom were Presbyterian, who really understood Christ's death in terms of retributive justice, punishing the sinner. Jesus takes our place, instead of restorative justice, in which Jesus overcomes sin, but not punish. He's not interested in punishing the sinners.
Uh-huh.
Um, so you had a kind of task to serve those kids, and the others were very mixed. Now, I would say, a colleague of mine asked a group of 200 prospective students at the end of one lecture he gave, how many of them believed in the afterlife? And he said not more than a quarter of all the kids believed in that.
Mhm.
So they believe in neurons, but they don't believe in anything beyond what can be seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched,
Mhm.
and studied scientifically.
Mhm.
So in a certain sense, that's something that, this also has to do with very few people having gone through a Catholic school system.
Mhm.
Many schools in this state have just closed.
Yeah.
Partly because you lost the human labor of
Mhm.
nuns.
Mhm.
They
sure.
couldn't afford to keep paying teachers an adequate salary. So it was
I-
understandable, but sad. Please.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
On that line, my experience out here, and I think it's probably not that much different from anywhere else, is that Catholic schools have tended to become either increasingly elitist, because the tuitions are, tuition is, still not what other private schools are, but still, often my experience was that a lot of Catholics and some non-Catholics chose to send their kids to Catholic schools because it was a cheap private school.
Yeah.
And that was certainly the case in Beverly Hills, and to a certain extent, it was becoming the case in Claremont too. But the other side of that coin is increasingly, I think the mission of Catholic schools is to serve the underserved and to, try to maintain enough of a population of students in the inner city to be able to make the school viable if they're able to get outside sources of funding, which there's never any guarantee of, but increasingly, I think the outside funding is being made available through various foundations. Now, here in LA, we've got a rather large and active Catholic Education Foundation, and there are a few other foundations that are kind of supported by and based on some wealthy Catholics with a mission to really serve the inner city.
Tom, I'm not sure, would Fred be aware of how much campus ministry you worked in?
Yes. Well, I mean, I've listened to some of these meetings, and
Yeah,
that was a wonderful period in
yeah,
Tom's.
the 80s and 90s, well, they were very important in my life, but there was a flourishing of campus ministry in the 80s. It was relatively well supported here in Los Angeles. The problem being that, with the exception of myself, of course,
I'm all ears now.
the archdiocese tended to send problem priests into those kinds of ministries.
Oh,
So you have, I think, a couple of areas where you had, well, Norm Supanchek and myself were probably the two most more or less normal priests that I encountered in LA in campus ministry, but others, particularly from religious orders, tended to be those who saw it as a sort of a cushy assignment, maybe to engage in whatever their other interests on the side may be. And sort of found it easier to be on the cutting edge of the spirit of Vatican II rather than paying much attention to what Vatican II really was and paying much attention to where our tradition is coming from. So it became too much a sort of a touchy-feely thing. My other observation about the traditional Newman centers during that time, at least, was that it tended to be a social group for misfits. Those who could not fit into other forms of social encounters, activities on campus, sort of found their refuge, in a sense, in a place that theoretically, at least, had to accept them. And,
Yeah.
and one interesting dynamic that I hadn't thought of in a while, but it was really obvious to me, is that there were some really, really good, active Catholic mission-oriented students who often tried to befriend and integrate those who simply couldn't fit anywhere. So we had a community that was struggling to be an inclusive community and sometimes succeeding in it. And,
Well,
and
that's a
I'm
won-
still, quite frankly, I'm still in touch with, over Facebook particularly, with at least half a dozen or more of those students at Cal State Long Beach from back in the 80s, they're grandparents now.
wow.
But that was kind of interesting.
I had the impression from your talk about that experience before that you really enjoyed the non-Catholic part of the ministry.
Well, the ecumenical part of it was very, very strong. And there were some really, really good people on, in the other ministries. Let me see that we associated a little bit with the Muslims, not too much, a little bit with the Jewish campus ministry, but one of the surprising things was how open the Mormons were.
Oh,
And
the last moral people.
yeah, in some ways, yeah. But they were very non-proselytizing and very open to even intellectual collaboration among us.
Wonderful.
So it was interesting.
The well, the last phase of my career at BC has been having sometimes a third of my class coming from China because
Mhm.
they afford the tuition, and all of them basically say they never heard of God during all their life in China.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you really are starting from scratch with them.
Mhm.
But that has really made me appreciate the notion of God's universal and unconditional love for everyone.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter whether they're baptized or call themselves Christian. And I try to sort of encourage them to pay attention to their interior life good and bad
Mhm.
desires and feelings and so forth, pretty much along the lines of the Jesuit spiritual exercises.
Yeah.
That that is something that works for non-Christians as well. And I'm not sure how
Well, it
successful.
worked for Matteo Ricci.
Yeah, it sure did. In fact, I just got done reading a paper about a Chinese person. The Chinese girl wrote about the comparison between Confucianism on friendship and what she learned about friendship in our course.
Uh-huh.
And she brought up, because we did bring it up, Matteo Ricci, and that was very nice.
Yeah.
Thank God he went there and did that, because I don't know what else we have to speak for in that context.
Yeah, and sadly, the ultra conservatives of that day got the ear of the Pope and got that pretty much condemned.
Lovely.
Exactly. You know, if I just, because I was for quite some time kind of interested in Matteo Ricci, at least enough to read a book or two about him. And you know what just seems to me so tragic that that whole movement that he started and got underway got so effectively squelched by the popes. And I think it was Pope Benedict the 14th, who otherwise was fairly progressive back in the, what was it, 1700, late 1700s, somewhere around there, who did suppress the whole mission, the Jesuit mission to China.
One thing that was emphasized in my reading about Matteo Ricci was how central friendship was.
Uh-huh.
That's a central theme in my courses.
Uh-huh.
That the cross really was an act of friendship,
Mm.
and enabling people to be friendly
Mhm.
and communicate friendliness to others.
How do you find the Chinese students to be in terms of friendship?
Well, it definitely is true that all the different ethnic groups at BC, Latinos and so forth, they in the eating rooms, like the blacks and so forth, they all hang together.
Mhm.
And so um, the ones who are most open from what you might call Asia are the Filipinos.
Mm.
And they have their national groups and parties, and all the other foreigners go to those.
Mhm.
So I was reading a mystery one time that took place in Hong Kong, and one of the things that the author pointed out was that the detectives like to go to the place where the Filipinos met, because they were so friendly and open and having fun.
Oh, that's
So it's a really wonderful thing about those people.
uh-huh.
And all my Filipino connections have been really so kind to me. In fact, we had a workshop in Rome in 2004, and there was a woman, a Filipino woman, getting her doctorate there. And she was a sister, and she organized all the housing for people who came from the States.
Mm.
Uh, so things that we would consider self-sacrificial to do,
Mhm.
and to just dive into them and enjoy doing it.
Mm.
And that's only one instance of one of the things we found out. My wife had to have her gallstones removed in Las Vegas when we were visiting my son, and most of the nurses were Filipino.
Mhm.
And when I came back and told one of my Jesuit friends who's been a chaplain at hospitals in New York, he said, Filipinos are transforming nursing in the States.
Mhm.
And I thought that was an interesting thing because that certainly was our experience.
Back in the early 70s, when I was at St. Philomena's in Carson, which was a very, very large Filipino community. They were, almost exclusively centered on nursing at Harbor General Hospital.
Oh,
And there were a dozen or more nursing homes, satellites of, in the neighborhood. They weren't institutionally satellites of them, but around Harbor General. And many of them were working there as well. So nursing seemed to be the predominant occupation for Filipinos for that community.
Tom, you might remember a Filipino from the class ahead of us who was a dear friend with Dick Sokol, Orlando Carvajal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And Orlando's relatives who came to this country, all involved in the medical field.
Yeah.
That we had quite a contrast, though. Orlando was so outgoing, and then Neil Adolfo, our classmate, was so reserved, was he not?
He was. He was. Any idea what has become of Neil?
I do not. I was hoping maybe you would.
No, I don't.
Orlando may know. I'll inquire.
Oh, okay.
He's permanently back in the Philippines, but has visited Sokol several times, and I jumped in on that. And
Uh-huh.
Carvajal got close to my folks. So
Uh-huh.
even in their later years, he came by to visit them. Quite just a generous, outgoing fellow who apparently is very successful in business back in the
Uh-huh.
Philippines now.
Mhm.
You need to just unlock your phone.
what do you mean?
Oh, my.
Get something with the bank account. So you unlock it.
I don't think it's on. Oh, you mean open?
Open.
Excuse me, guys.
All right.
No problem.
Not a problem.
Father Barron coming up soon, Tom, on your plan?
I don't know. Do we want to do that today? Because there's just the three of us.
Or to put it off
I'm
till
not,
next
I'm not,
week,
I'm
you
not-
think?
and I think, Fred, you mentioned that watching Barron's take on Dante was not necessarily at the center of your priorities, right?
Sure enough, but I enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
And George Crook is the one that started it. So
Who
I
was?
wonder, George Crook is the one who actually came forth with the idea.
I think
So-
you're right not to do it without them.
So shall we just, it looks like it'll be the three of us, maybe one of the others, maybe Almy will, his wife Sandy, maybe she'll let him have a break from the Christmas decorating.
Good call, good call. Okay, if I may then take another slight track. I've been reading Eric Metaxas, Seven Men and the Secret of Their Greatness.
Uh-huh.
And he starts off with George Washington, whom he feels, even though he's chronologically first in the book, he feels that what George Washington chose to do in not becoming king, but establishing the presidency and only keeping two terms was spectacularly valuable. So I'm wondering, Fred, does George Washington come into any of your curricula?
No, as far as I know, besides his wonderful departure speech, we don't have much access to a lot of his writing. we do talk about the founding fathers and especially the key authors of the Constitution. The Federalist Papers, which are a commentary or propaganda for the acceptance of the Constitution,
Sure.
but otherwise not.
I'm just intrigued, Johnny, by your fascination with Eric Metaxas, because I hadn't heard of him.
Oh, it
So
began,
naturally, I
it be-
Googled him.
yeah,
And the first thing that comes up is that he is an avid, and one might even say belligerent Trumpist.
well, I guess that puts him in the shadow range with me, but I got started with Metaxas because of his biography on Bonhoeffer,
Yeah.
which goes back about 15 years or so. But it
Mhm.
was so well written
Mhm.
that I paid attention. And let's face it, Metaxas brings his faith in a lot. And I'm guessing that may be a draw to the conservative religious aspect of his life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting. I ran across in the New Republic, which of course, is considerably left of center as a publication. They published a dialogue, which I think came. I don't know if it was originally a conversation. I think it was like a podcast between Metaxas and another conservative author who was a never Trumpist.
Oh,
So the dialogue is very interesting because there's absolutely no listening or understanding of the other person's point of view on either of them. And most of,
something in the DNA of Republicans, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, I've read enough dialogues between let's say left side and right side to know that neither one really listens to the other. It's not just Republicans, in my humble estimate.
I'm going to jump in just for a second. My dad was a lifelong Republican. My mother, a lifelong Democrat.
Mhm.
And every time an election came up, we would have at our dining room table a discussion. And I would say at least 90% of the time, mother and dad would vote the same way. And so we were a both and
Mhm.
community, which I don't think exists much now.
Not too much.
That
So
brings
anyway,
up-
go back. I'm sorry, Fred.
Oh, I just meant to say that Tom got me into Jonathan Haidt,
Uh-huh.
and I've been watching some of his YouTube sessions,
Uh-huh.
and I'm very impressed by him.
I am too.
Yeah.
He certainly is a listener,
Yes,
Yes.
good
but
call.
he knows so much. He's in contact with so much that he's also a helpful speaker. And so
Mhm.
I really do admire the programs he's participated in that I've had a chance to see.
I think
thought
I'm going
that-
to reach out to Phil Berryman. Berryman is almost scandalized that I'm reading so much of Metaxas. And I think I'll inquire how his take compares with mine. Super positive with Jonathan Haidt. Tom, I think I interrupted you.
Well, I was just going to say, it seemed to me that the model of a respectful and mutually enlightening conversation is in that hour and a half. Half of it was a trialogue, the other half dialogue between Haidt and Jordan Peterson. I
Oh,
think I sent you the link for that way back when. I can resend it.
I missed that. I'd be
Would you? Because I don't
Yeah.
remember it.
And the third one in that, who had to go halfway through, is another crazy but utterly brilliant and fascinating person, Steven Pinker.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, what was refreshing about it was each one was engaging the other on ideas rather than just trying to position themselves and ridicule
Uh-huh.
the others, which is obviously what happens far too much in public discourse. I'll also send you this Metaxas thing where, they just spend a very entertaining time. Probably it was a half hour or so. It took 15 minutes to read. Basically telling each other how full of shit the other one is.
That's
Well,
all.
Fred, how about your history with the faculty at Boston College? Are they equally open with dialogue? Is there more separation over the years, or is there much change?
I would say it's a very open place. I've almost never experienced any real conflict with anyone, which means that not everybody agrees with me, but we do listen to each other.
Uh-huh.
But one thing that, in terms of that Metaxas and Trump,
Mhm.
one thing Haidt pointed out in the thing I listened to yesterday was so much of the going to Trump was really disappointment with the other side.
Uh-huh.
It was negative. So strong was the negative feeling that they put up, and even people who are absolutely moral and good put up with all the awful things about Trump, mostly because they're against the other thing.
Mhm.
Usually it has to do with tropes, like the Democrats are too socialist, or the Democrats are too accepting of people from other cultures and immigrants and so forth and so on.
Yes, yes. And then the abortion issue too.
Absolutely abortion,
Yeah.
yes. So I don't know whether that was mentioned in the dialogue between Metaxas and whoever he dialogued with.
Mm, Well, it wasn't a dialogue, but
Diatribe. huh?
diatribe, yeah. I don't even recall if it came up because they weren't talking about issues. They were talking to a certain extent about positions and basically saying, anyone who doesn't hold my position is wrong. Or actually, more to the point, anybody who holds your position is wrong.
Yes.
Wasn't even a defense of positions. It was, thoroughly, but which is what's happening so much today.
Personal attacks.
Personal attacks, yeah.
Well, the hate problem.
Yeah.
Hatred is a big deal now.
Yeah.
And the inability to listen to each other is going to do us in, I'm afraid.
That's what I fear. Fred, can you enlighten me on another thing that is of somewhat interest to me or concern? How is Loyola Marymount viewed from the other end of the country? How is that institution that overlooks the left coast viewed from the right coast?
I don't think there is much of a view.
Uh-huh.
We have colleagues in the Lonergan Circle at Loyola Marymount,
Uh-huh.
and the person who was in charge of the theology department when I was hired at BC, became the president of LMU for a while.
Mhm.
And I asked my colleague, what did he think of Tom O'Malley as the president? He said, he was from Central Casting. So in other words, the type of person that would attract people to help pay for LMU.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what I gather. I might be wrong about that, but he's also a very, very open and wonderful and really actually learned person
Mhm.
and a character too.
Mhm.
So, but otherwise, we have a few of our graduates from the philosophy department there, and
Mhm.
they seem to be very happy.
Uh-huh.
So there's certainly nothing to, there's no way of looking down on them
Mhm.
from BC side. And I think there is a kind of willingness to pretty much like all the 28 different Jesuit colleges and universities.
Mhm.
There's a
Yeah.
esprit de corps, so to speak.
The reason I ask is that two people that I know, one from out of the past, and at this moment I can't remember either of their names. The other one is somebody that I know through the American Solidarity Party, who ran for, governor in this last recall election. He was one of the 35 or so people on the ballot for, and his name is not occurring to me, but they were both former professors at LMU who really are very down on the institution for losing its Catholic identity.
Oh, well.
And I think that they are probably judging a little bit too harshly, because I know, I know some of the people, the Jesuits who are there, and they are absolutely, nobody could accuse Tom Roush or Alan Figueroa Deck of being weak on their Catholic identity. But
I think that's similar to BC.
yeah.
That by and large, I would say probably the majority of the faculty aren't really Catholic,
Mhm.
or perhaps not. I don't know about whether they're Christian or not.
Yeah.
But
I think
nevertheless, the Catholic identity is always claimed. So at football games in the halftime, they'll say Boston College, a Catholic and Jesuit institution.
Mhm.
They don't hide behind anything there.
Right.
One thing that would be true is when I went to BC in 71, all the classrooms had religious figures in them, like a crucifix or some kind of picture. And all those things no longer are in the classroom.
Mhm.
So there is that drift.
Yeah.
Now, if a person is, well, we have super staunch Catholics. Like you've probably heard of Peter Kraft,
Oh, yeah.
and they seem tremendously happy there.
Mhm.
And one thing great about them is that kids who came to BC were sent to BC by their families or chose to come to BC because of their Catholicism, get to go to people like him.
Mhm.
And I would say, so I don't think you have secularists pushing secularism
Mhm.
at BC. I haven't heard of that.
Mm. Yeah.
It seems to be more open and less ideological.
Personally, I think their beef is more that they are not, holding a strictly conservative Catholic line in, for example, the speakers that they may allow groups to invite.
Oh.
And that people who are tinged with being associated with pro-abortion causes and whatnot are not necessarily, they may speak there. Some of these people, I think, would say, well, if you let a Democrat speak, you're no longer Catholic.
Oh, boy.
That's
think-
sort of the,
Sad
mean-
to say,
yeah.
yep,
Massachusetts is-
single issue too. I mean, it is all about abortion and not all the rest of our spectrum.
Yeah, well, Massachusetts is so Democrat that, that's not an issue. But we have besides our theology department, the seminary, which more or less is defunct across the street, except for a handful of conservative seminarians and conservative teachers. The Jesuits had a school in Weston School of Theology, which moved to Boston College's campuses after Boston
Can I
College.
excuse myself for a second? I need to,
Sure,
I need to do something to be more comfortable.
of course. So, yeah, there just isn't that exclusionary spirit. And there really is so much going on that happens to be Catholic. And I wouldn't say hyper conservative Catholic, but I wouldn't say they're eliminated either. So in that respect, I think BC is doesn't fit into that thing of not Catholic. But if you're super conservative, it might be the case. But I'm not meeting as many of those kinds of people.
I'm not sure where this came from, but sometime in the last 2 weeks, I got an opinion that the majority of Catholic seminaries in the United States are heavily conservative in terms of the new vocations, that the candidates tend to be much more on the conservative side than on the liberal side.
Yes, I've heard that there's a strong anti-Vatican II sentiment
Yeah,
being inculcated somewhere along the line, and that guys who think they have a vocation to the priesthood are in that boat, so to speak. We're talking about the growing predominance of anti-Vatican II seminarians and young priests.
Mhm. Well, that's something that Roger Mahoney is very concerned about happening at St. John's.
Oh, yeah.
say more, please.
Well, it seems that the new rector, 2 years ago, that Gomez brought in, who nobody really quite seems to know. I think he may have been a priest in the archdiocese, but not that well known. But he's a fairly young guy who was educated at the Opus Dei college in Rome, where Gomez has also sent a number of other Opus Dei or number of other young priests to study. That the seminarians that seem to be getting through there as priests tend more and more to be the very right-wing type, who are also kind of concerned about the Roman collar and the cuffs and the lace and sort of narcissistic
Oh, great.
types.
Real evangelists.
Yeah. So
Back to Mahoney. How does Mahoney's opinion come up, and say more about it, please?
well, you may recall about a month ago, I was part of a group of retired priests that he had lunch with in a
Yes,
in a restaurant down here, and he just expressed considerable alarm about the direction that the archdiocese is going under his successor. And a part of it being that the seminary seems to be attracting and forming and ordaining Opus Dei style priests. So,
Reminds me, at the annual Lonergan workshops, we have people from other countries, and one is from Mexico, a strong English speaker, and
mhm,
knows Lonergan very well, and the other one was from India.
mhm.
When the Indian came into the room where he was going to room together with the Mexican introduced himself as Andres Ancona, Opus Dei, and the Indian said, Ivo Coelho, Opus Night. But they were joking with each other.
Uh-huh. So,
Too many Opus Dei guys in the Lonergan circle.
yeah. But apparently, Mahoney wrote a letter basically expressing his concern to the Holy Father, who in turn wrote back to him saying, yeah, I'm aware of these problems, keep the faith and hang in there. But,
Uh-huh.
it's hard knowing. There's also I'm trying to remember who said that. I think it was Jack Steger, my spiritual director, who there was one of the priests who is Opus Dei priests who is quite close to Mahoney, not Mahoney, Gomez, also expressed that Gomez is not happy, that he is overburdened, that his heart really is not into pastoral care or administration, and that he's just struggling to kind of keep doing what he's doing, to be faithful. And that, you look at the guy and he doesn't really seem to be happy. So I don't know exactly what the future is going to be in this next year or two, or how much, what the kind of leadership will continue with the Conference of Bishops. I don't know how long his term is supposed to be. I'm not sure if it's up now, or I don't think it is, but I don't know.
So I'm a little bit ignorant on this. Does the Council of Bishops send a list to Pope Francis? How does the successor get to be successor?
Well, usually it's the one who is elected, this is their own conference. So this is the Pope Francis, or has nothing to do with how people are elected to positions within regional bishops' conferences. So it's it's purely up to the bishops to be electing the heads of the committees and the president and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, we'll see. I'm not as well up on this as or as articulate as I should be. So I'm sort of expressing a concern that I have as a result of the concern that others are certainly expressing around.
Yes, got it.
Unlike people like Cor de Leon and Chaput, Gomez does not storm into the position seeking to change everything or everybody. You know, there were very, very few actual outward changes made in the stance and management and direction of the archdiocese when Gomez came on. But on the other hand, bit by bit, he is putting his own people into key positions who I think most of them tend to be what would I say, folks who are not pushing hard on things either, but who will bit by bit effect change in the direction that they want.
Mhm.
And of course, the direction that that change is coming is pretty much what they interpret as fidelity, you know, and orthodoxy.
So is it your opinion, I'm asking them both, is Pope Francis as popular and well-received around the world as is my impression, and that the US conservative Catholic is less reflective of the rest of the world with regard to Pope Francis?
Fred, what do you think?
My impression is that he's better received in other countries. I think there's a way in which, because I was in the German-speaking context after doing my dissertation,
Here comes George's iPhone.
great to see.
It looks like he's in outer space. Nope, he just came down to Earth.
I've been in
Oh.
outer space most of my life.
Then we
George,
see
are
the
you
trees.
driving or are you riding?
I'm riding. So I guess I could take off the sunglasses.
Turn left.
Ta-dam.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Turn left.
So I'm using a phone, so I'm not used to that. Let me get the lay of the land.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's Tom.
Turn left.
Now.
And
how
Fred
do
and John.
I get oh, wait a minute, here we are. Participants, okay, whoops.
0.1 miles. Turn left.
I won't be able to see everybody. What am I
Turn left,
doing
George.
wrong?
Turn left.
But he is a lefty.
Participants, stop video, mute, more.
Turn left.
I'll be darned, I don't know how to get it on this phone so I can see everybody.
Yeah, I
Are
don't
you
know.
able to hear us, the rest of us?
I can hear you, yeah, John.
0.1 miles. Turn left.
Now, there may be a little button somewhere that says view,
It says what?
view,
View.
and you may be able to get gallery view.
Turn left.
Well, damn it.
Okay, you're back.
Da, 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 da.
Well, I'm just glad you're not driving.
Yeah, well, I have two. Let's see, participants. That doesn't do it.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want to figure that out and we'll continue talking about the
Yeah,
state of the
just keep
church?
talking and I'll
No,
keep screwing around.
I was going to say that because I was in Switzerland after and Germany after the council, it seemed to me that the reception of the council went comparatively smoothly there. And you didn't necessarily have the overwhelming departure of priests, and you didn't have overwhelmingly overreactions to the way the council was changing the church. So that it seems to me that in the US, you had a kind of period of silliness and craziness
Mhm.
in the reception of the council. And that would also spur another conservative reaction. I think the other thing that strikes me is that the bishops and cardinals in Germany and Switzerland were less bureaucratic than the bishops and cardinals in the United States. And I really do think that Weber is right, that bureaucratic structures are really for the sake of power. And so when a person figures that they're losing power, they the power that they've had, which they thought was good for the church and so forth and so on. I'm not saying they had bad faith, but I'm saying they get shaped by the structures, the institutional structures you enter into.
Mhm.
So in good faith, they overreact the other way. I've been kind of, because of you guys, I've been kind of impressed with Bishop Barron, because he seems to be more of a person who didn't overreact and has tried to keep up some of the good things the council really wanted. And I think that might be because he spent a lot of time in France.
Right.
And there again, I suppose that the council's reception there didn't go through a nutty period.
Mhm.
So I don't know, I really don't know, but that seems to me to have a large impact that so many of the priests in Germany, and I really thought this was true of the German seminarians in Rome when I was there. They really were smart, and they really knew their theology, but they really intended to be pastoral.
Mhm.
They weren't trying to climb, it seems to me.
Mhm.
You could say a certain number of the seminarians I was with at the North American College, probably the most outstanding one was John Worrell,
Mhm.
former Archbishop of Washington. They clearly were wanting to get into the upper echelons of the bureaucracy
Mhm.
and knew how to do it. And because of the council, they could put a kind of, this might be that kind of pastoral face on themselves, even though what they were really about was exercising power.
Mhm.
So that is something that we might think about, but I really don't know. I do know this, that doesn't it seem like the pandemic has caused more or less an incredible emptying of the churches, and that people who knew they should stay away because of their health decided to stay away for other reasons?
I'm afraid that's true. Tom, you get a feel?
I suspect so. And I don't know if it's that they decided to stay away for other reasons or never really came up with a reason to go back. You know, I still think a lot of people are very skittish about re-engaging in long close encounter events. You know,
True, yeah, I'm sure.
there are some of the diehards, and of course you can get 30,000, 50,000 people at a super spreader concert where they end up killing one another in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
But
St. John Newman, my parish in Irvine, is making an effort with an outdoor mass to try to appeal
Yeah.
to that issue, I think.
Ah.
I'm personally increasingly thinking that we're missing an opportunity, and maybe the bishops will address this because, you know, their document wasn't nearly as bad as some of us, myself, very much, wasn't as bad as we thought it, as we feared it might be, nor as good as we might in our fondest dreams hope that it would be. But, you know, they are engaging in this 2-year process of Eucharistic revival to culminate in some kind of a grand Eucharistic convention or something like that in 2 years. To me, it might be an opportunity to revive the concept of Eucharist and sacramentality in terms of our communal relationships with one another as church, as members of the body of Christ, rather than trying to sell, which I think they do, to sell the Eucharist as a spiritual commodity. And
I haven't read their statement yet. Is that what it does, Tom?
well, I as long as you're using the terminology of receiving communion, you're talking about a commodity that you receive. And making it sort of a transaction. What makes you worthy to get this thing? And of course, there's more to it than that. But so often the language tends to speak to the Eucharist as being something that we receive rather than something that we do.
Uh-huh.
And going back to the language even of the early church, it is they don't talk so much about reception of communion. They talk about participation. They talk about involvement, engagement. They use that kind of terminology. So
I wonder, I've had several long conversations with my pastor about the people who haven't returned. And in our parish, it's about 50%.
mhm,
They've done head counts and so forth. And he says that's, you know, many parishes are far worse. And,
yeah, I think they probably are.
I hear the same.
yeah, but I think the idea of having, yeah, we hear about all the people that are defiant about the vaccination and masks, but there also have to be a lot of people that are afraid.
Mhm,
You know, and that outdoor mass idea that John mentioned, I think is something I'm going to certainly pass on to my pastor. And it might matter. I don't know. I
mhm.
think a lot of it is just people got out of the habit. You know, Sunday mass. I mean, on those rare occasions when I've had some reason not to go to Sunday mass, you know, gone Friday after Saturday afternoon or something. It's great having that time on Sunday where you don't go to church, isn't it?
Mhm.
You know, you've got the whole day and it's really cool. And a lot of it, I suspect, is people got out of the habit. Well, Fred, do you think that's a factor?
I'm pretty sure. And also, if the larger proportion of the church population was older, they would be more afraid.
Yeah.
I think that would have an effect. But I think one of the problems with my wife is Episcopalian, and because of my contact through her with the Episcopal Church, I find that the Episcopal Church is not so uptight. The idea of not having women priests, for example, the whole idea of really you have to be a male to be an alter Christus. That is nuts. And in a way, I would be used to the male priesthood, but now I know women priests who are as good as any male priests I've ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And the same thing with married priests. I haven't seen any letdown in pastoral care because a person has a family or whatever. All these things just seem to be hang-ups from my point of view again.
mhm.
And in a way, I just don't get it. Nevertheless, all my confreres from the seminary and so forth, they like you guys, they're really good priests and good people, whatever their walk of life. So it's not that you're putting down what's there. Although this other thing that we were talking about just before George came, about the new, younger conservative priests who are anti-Vatican II and the seminarians who are coming through now tend to be, that is really upsetting. And the idea that it's the enjoyment of smells and bells and cufflinks and so forth makes you wonder what the hell vocation are they really in? What made them think that this was what it meant to be a priest?
Yeah, how do you see that, George? Because one of the things, it was in the conversation before you came on, was that I was talking about how alarmed Cardinal Mahoney is about
Yeah.
what's happening now.
I think it's the strangest phenomenon I could ever think of with people's opinions, large body of opinion. Just a quick story. We're coming from Betty's Brothers, and he's the retired bishop out there,
Yeah,
as you know, and he told us his story. The Diocese of San Bernardino began its synodal thing with a mass, and at that mass they did they incorporated into the mass Native American and other uh, 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 ceremonies.
uh-huh.
An Indian, a Native American, I should say, in his traditional garb, offering up a bowl of incense, and then turning each of the four directions, and not invoking any non-Christian God, but incorporating that kind of nature-based spirituality. And it became this year a cause celeb with there's a new bishop, and he was just taken by surprise. Somebody wrote a screed against this, and uh, and the seminarians, to me, of the diocese, I think to a man, supported the criticism. And my brother-in-law was saying if he were still the bishop, the ordinary, he would have met with them and said, "Where did you get this notion that this is not reverent? Where did you get this notion that this is false worship, that this is syncretist, that this is all these things?" And they, these are people in formation that aren't technically seminarians yet. The new bishop, the ordinary, had to meet with them and wrote a letter to the people of the diocese explaining the ceremony, and which just before we left his house, Betty's brother read to me, and it was, I'll find all this online and send it to you guys. But the thing that blew away my brother-in-law was these seminarians who don't know anything about theology yet just lined up and turned on the bishop and the diocese and were, describing this as pagan and all of that. How could that be? So, I read somewhere that Francis, in trying to alter the composition of the American hierarchy, is having a hard time identifying in the younger clergy people he would want to be bishops
Mhm,
for exactly these issues.
mhm,
How can this be?
yeah. Have you talked very much with, now his name is escaping me too.
Oh, my brother-in-law?
No, Parker Sandoval.
Only a little. I haven't had breakfast with him in a couple of months.
Mhm,
Although I approached him about it last week and we're going to have one.
mhm.
We could get him back, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he's dismayed. I remember he told us St. John's, Fred, is the only seminary in the country where the wearing of cassocks is not mandatory, apparently.
Huh.
Didn't he say something to that effect?
Yeah, that I don't know, but that could well be. But I would suspect that there's a fair number up there. In fact, I think I've seen some pictures that, they're doing it very much on their own.
We have a seminary in residence in our parish because it's an internship year.
Mhm,
Chicano kid from Oxnard, and a very likable guy and very capable. And the pastor has him actually preaching sermons,
mhm,
to practice. And one day he showed up at a semi-Jesuit cassock and a Roman collar.
mhm.
And, I said to the pastor with whom I had breakfast, where the hell did that come from? And he laughed and he said, yeah, I know, I have to talk him down. And I said, well, I wanted to go up to the seminarian and say, hi, 1950s. But I didn't.
Mhm.
But I had to deal with my own reaction, which was surprisingly critical
Mhm.
of him for doing that. And but it separated him from the rest of us, at best somehow.
Mhm.
And what else is it for?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't know, Tom.
how is your brother-in-law? How is Ricky? You know him as Ricky. Everybody else knows him as Jerry.
Well, his name is Gerald Richards.
Yeah.
And the family name was always Ricky.
So how is he doing? How is he?
So he's doing
Health-wise?
fine. Fine. He banged his knee and was crippled up, but that's dissipated.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember he had that very sad event of his new bishop, auxiliary bishop, suddenly dying, Dennis O'Neill. Back when.
We lost your,
You're muted, George. Unmute yourself.
Get in an accident. How you doing?
Okay.
there you are, you're back.
Yeah, his health is fine.
Yeah, good.
he's gonna go to Texas for 4 months, and then come back to San Bernardino. He finds himself, in spite of all the goodwill in the world and in spite of all the natural humility he has, the new guy will do something different from what he would have done
Mhm.
naturally. And, it's, I think, far more difficult for him than he ever thought it would be.
Yeah,
It's my interpretation.
yeah. Yeah, I can certainly see that. If I were living back in the parish I came from, I would have probably pretty much the same problem.
Yeah, I asked him when we were leaving, which was right before I went on, if he would agree to show up online with us some Friday. And he said, nope. And I said, how come? He said, because I'm retired. And whatever I said would be Bishop Barnes says, and I'm retired. And I said, well, then you could invoke confidentiality. And he said, no, but people would call me Bishop. They'd refer to me as Bishop. And, that's not my role anymore. So
Mhm.
I can't get
Give
him
it
to
a
do
year, maybe a year from now, he'll see
Yeah.
it differently.
Yeah. Johnny's pulling a Mike Malloy on me, no matter how many times I ask him, The
Yeah.
answer's the same. No.
Yep, yep.
Well, I could see that, I think that's one reason why I would never even ask Mahoney. Even though I think I would have access to him sufficiently to be able to do it, even though we're not, close friends or anything like that. But I would not want to put him in a position of being uncomfortable.
While we're thinking in that direction, probably this next week, I'll be engaged in some conversation with Gary Neer.
Pull over, Betty.
And I need feedback from you as a group. Should I invite him for a one-time visit? Because he's interested in that, but I told him I'll get back to him after the Thanksgiving holidays.
I'm sorry, Todd. We're having a little excitement here in the car. What did you say? You have to. Our left. Oh, good. Why not? Our mirror just fell out.
Dear.
Oh my.
You're back.
Huh?
Not going to stay.
Well, it won't stay. Well, drive slowly, I guess. The passenger side mirror just fell out. Oh well, why not?
Oh my.
Anyway,
Not the passenger side.
driver's side. That's right. I'm the passenger. Okay, we're underway.
It's gonna fall out. I can see it. See, it's moving.
Yeah.
It's gonna come out right now. I don't know if there's any more shoulder.
Tom, I'll just send out emails for feedback, okay?
Yeah, my own feeling is, I, well, let me put it this way. I'm fine with having an extra member in the group.
Should I pull it out?
No.
Fall out. And
We're
it's
probably
be-
gonna have to do something like that. And well, why not? But I don't know how everybody else would feel. The thing is, I find it very difficult to ask him to be you know, he's a classmate. We've all got that relationship. He's not an outside expert that we could say, could you make a guest appearance? I think if he were to come on and really like the idea,
Maybe.
we
roll
would
your
have to
window down
say,
and-
well, you know, why not be part of the weekly discussion? And that would be fine with me, but I don't know if everybody else is fine with it.
Okay, okay.
Get off
I more or less set the stage that this would be a one-time visit. He's still got a practice going. He does a Zoom with his clients every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Um,
Rubber
Yeah.
band might be.
You know, the other person that we have talked about is Joe Bracken, that I still haven't managed
Get
to
off
get in
the
touch
freeway.
with. Fred, do you know Joe Bracken?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know of him. I've heard
Yeah.
Trinity.
Well, you know, I got to know him a little bit in Claremont because he would come periodically, spend about 6 months at the Claremont School of Theology, the Claremont Graduate Institute with the process theology team.
Right, get out of the car.
And he's in his 90s. He still is apparently fairly active, but I haven't been able to make contact yet. And I don't know if he would want to or whether we would really have a lot to talk about
Right.
after all these years.
I wanted to ask John about his connection with Ralph Platts.
Oh, when I was still running the adult faith formation at St. John Newman, Ralph came and did a number of workshops for people on early fathers and church history. He is extremely well-read, but very conservative. And Tom Cotton is more or less the host of that large group you've seen on the emails. Bernie Brakel and Ralph Platts, and those two seem to be the most active. And I don't know what else they do in their lives, but the two of them are incredibly active, and I just delete often. But Ralph is sure well read and very, very proud of his Greek and Latin heritage. So he interacts with people all around the world in Greek and in Latin.
Wow. Wonderful. And he never had Art Desmond?
Good. I think he did.
Probably, yeah.
I'm wondering if Daspit taught at Detroit Street, because Ralph was there and skipped San Fernando and went straight up to Camarillo.
Right. Wow. So I was interested.
Ralph
because-
would have been, what, a year ahead of Berryman?
I think at least one, maybe 2 years
Maybe, yeah.
ahead of Berryman. Yeah.
Was she in the Cardinals class?
Mahoney's?
Might have been.
Could
I
be.
think he wasn't Berryman in Mahoney's class?
I don't think so, because we knew Berryman. Berryman was 6th year, was he not?
Yeah.
When we
Yes.
were 9th grade.
But
And I think
the Cardinal
Mahoney
was
had moved on
right
already.
ahead of them.
Yeah. Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah, I think Mahoney was he 1 year ahead of him or 2 year ahead? 2 years ahead of him. I don't really know.
So just one more question about Platts. Is he contentiously conservative?
No, respectfully conservative. Brakel is contentiously conservative, but not Platts.
Mhm.
And can you figure out why that's true of Bernie?
Bernie is eccentric in many ways. That's all I can say.
Okay.
I love him dearly. When my father passed away and my mother needed painting of any type, he was there. Brakel loved my family. And it was only after my mother passed away that this arch conservative aspect of Brakel came to the surface. So hard to say. But I would say Platts is more gentle in that regard than Brakel.
I see.
Although Bernie, once challenged, will kind of alter his tone, right, John?
I missed that, George. I'm sorry. What?
Bernie Brakel, once challenged by a return email, that says, "Oh, Bernie, stop the bullshit," or something. Will stop the bullshit. He changes tone when he's admonished.
I don't think it'll last.
Oh, then he comes right back.
My take on it. And I have been deleting a lot of his recent stuff just because of the past. But I read Platts.
Well, I take it that it would be interesting to hear what Bernie thinks of what we were talking about earlier, the conservatism of the younger priests and the seminarians at the.
I will reach out to him and inquire about that. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it would.
And Platts, yeah.
And Platts.
Fred, you know who Father Roush is, right? Thomas Roush.
Yes, I've read things by him. He seems
Yeah,
good.
he's at Loyola Marymount,
Yes.
emeritus now. And Ned and I had dinner with him a couple of months ago. And he said, what's it like teaching today and all that? And he said, the undergraduates at Loyola Marymount have no intellectual curiosity whatsoever. Are you finding that?
Thank God, no. But part of it has to do with that my usual courses have to do with people who aren't necessarily in theology, and the courses aren't theology, but they're really live wires and really wonderful, wonderful students to be with year after year. In the huge class, 40 kids, maybe a third of whom are Chinese from China. You can't really tell too much because when you have over 15 people, you can't have a class conversation. You can just have sometimes people asking questions, but you just can't have a back and forth the way you do at the smaller classes. But again and again through the years, I've been so impressed by these people. And of course, I have the luck of being able to teach graduate students who are really on the ball and wonderful people by and large. So that's a wonderful consolation. And I direct their dissertations and things like that. So, and they're just really neat people. I don't know how they'll ever get a job, but they sure are nice to be with. And whoever got them on their faculty would be blessed. So I don't have that same problem that Tom talked about.
Any particular dissertation that has caught your interest in the past year or two?
Oh, I just finished a doctorate with, well, two people. We have a Lithuanian student who wrote a book, who wrote a dissertation on Lonergan's idea of the law of the cross. And it was absolutely fabulous, going from the New Testament through Augustine and Aquinas, Anselm, Augustine and Aquinas, and Lonergan. And she was just so bright that BC, and she's from Lithuania, but BC asked her to please come back and teach for a semester here. So that was wonderful. But the latest one was a dissertation that had to do with Laudato Si. And he was trying to investigate the scientific resources that Laudato Si needs to be filled in by. And that would also include Lonergan's theology, because he's so open to both the human and the natural sciences. And so he wrote a superb dissertation. It was very long, but it was really good. So so there have been some really wonderful ones that I've been blessed to have to do with. By and large, the dissertations, I think I've directed about 50 dissertations. And by and
Wow.
large, they've been marvelous. And it just is a wonderful thing. Actually, if I had to face what Roush was facing, I don't know whether I could still keep on teaching, but now it's a lifeline, something like this conversation every Friday.
Geez. How are your Chinese students? These are from mainland China? From
Mainland China, never heard of God all their years till they came to BC. And so you have it split. You have students who, among the Chinese, they take it because it's a required course at BC, and they just take it and they don't really try to understand what I'm saying and so forth. But there are others who get interested and who give it a fair shake. Before you came on, I was telling Tom about a paper I just read from one of these students about comparing. A central theme of my courses is always friendship, starting with Aristotle and then going through Jesus. And she was comparing Confucian notions of friendship with Christian notions. And she really made because I had brought up, I think, Matteo Ricci, who really based his whole apostolate in China on making friends with people no matter where they stood and just being friendly to them. And I thought, well, that's the way to be a missionary.
That's Christ-like, yes.
Yeah, and she really did appreciate it. So I was very happy about that. So they really try. I ask them, even if you don't agree with things, if you need to write a paper about what you don't agree with, I'd be interested to know how you don't, because that'll help me to teach you, your successors that come into my class. And they give it a good shot. And it really makes sense what they can't understand, because it is so counter intuitive, like dying for somebody and so forth out of friendship. And it's not stuff they'd hear talked about very much. So it's fun to have them there, although it makes it challenging. It's challenging. So I really do have to, as I told Tom earlier, I think, and maybe John, I really do emphasize God's universal and unconditional love for each one. And I try to introduce them to interiority in such a way that they could discern the things that make them happy and the things that make them sad, and also the impulses they have when they know that they have an impulse to do the right thing, they're also tend to do the wrong thing. What pushes them to do the right thing? What do you think that is? And I tell them it's the Holy Spirit, because everybody has the Holy Spirit because of the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. There's no one left out. And some of them seem to respond to that. So
And others not.
well, others are, yes, I would say they all say they never heard of God before. And some of them who never heard of God before don't care about hearing him, but some of them actually do. And that's really a wonderful thing. And so in that way, they're not that different from the American kids in my class.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, I got a good response from those kids too. And I'm very open to the fact that they can't swallow things in particular about what I'm teaching them. But the things that do catch on, for example, are friendship, how central that is. So for example, if you're a friend to someone, it'll help you understand what it means to be just to someone, because you're at stake in the friendship. You're aware of what it means to love the other for their own sake, if you possibly can. And if you do that, they can see how, well, that'll help you realize how to give other people their due if you have a friendly approach to them. So in a way, it's more philosophical than strictly theological. But I always put it in the theological terms, because the life, death, and resurrection of Christ is the most friendly thing that ever happened on earth. And I'm not silent or embarrassed by that fact.
Mhm.
So they at least get to hear it. But they're interested in their relationships with each other. And
They are.
they care about it, and it's a way in. Does that make sense, George?
But our concept of friendship, that you're talking about is Aristotelian and Judaic, I guess, to it, the self and being willing to sacrifice for that individual, or are they more, what's the word I want?
We're having trouble.
I've lost George's audio.
Me too.
Sorry, George, your audio was shot.
Oh, am I back?
You're
Yeah.
back.
Now you're
Oh,
back.
okay. Fred, how hard is it for the Chinese kids or students to understand our concept of friendship? Is it countercultural for them, or is it just obvious that there is such a thing as friendship?
I think that's interesting question. Thank you very much for that. You really do see that spontaneously they care about their relationships with each other, and that caring really has to do with wanting to be friendly. And they may never have framed it in those terms, but it's so central to Greek, Platonic, and Aristotelian philosophy that's a way in, because those philosophers are talking about not individuals, but people in community. And interestingly enough, that idea about not being individuals, but being part of a community is something that the communists do tend to say is important. So you have a way in, oddly enough, in a way that wouldn't necessarily be true of American liberal Democrats who are just individual and think individuality is the key to their freedom, et cetera, which means they have an unnormed way of thinking about freedom. It's reduced to more or less, which is nuts. You have a lot of nuts in your class who aren't Chinese, but the Chinese tend not to be quite as nuts. So in a way, it's surely a challenge, but it seems like it's something you can work with, and I try to.
That's very interesting to hear. I can't comment on it any further, except that, you know, this relationship of the individual as individual, and on the one hand, and the individual as member of a community on the other. It always fascinates me because one, it's sort of a yin and yang thing. They, both individual and community depend on each other.
Yes,
And yet-
absolutely.
And yet so very often, one tends to dominate and sometimes threaten to overwhelm the other, individualism or communitarianism.
Yeah. Well, you brought out how the bishop's always talking about the Eucharist as a transaction. That goes together with liberal democratic individualism.
It does.
In some sense, what you're trying to inculcate involves shoveling shit against the tide.
It does. It does. With a industrial strength fan blowing. Anyway,
I get the reference. So let me just thank you, since time is running out.
yeah, time is running out. Shall we, yeah, there's, I think there may be a danger in our quitting for George, although George is kind of frozen. Are you still there, George? George, your image is frozen. We don't hear you.
But it's a nice picture.
I
Yeah,
was gonna recommend Crook for our final prayer. George?
well, I guess we'll have to recommend Johnny for the final prayer.
Well, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
We give thee thanks for these and all the benefits we've received from your bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, George, you're back. But we don't, you're on mute.
We saw your middle finger.
Unmute yourself, George. There you
There
go.
we go. Can you
Okay,
hear me now?
we can.
Yes.
I just want to ask Fred, how's your health? What was it like getting back to the classroom?
Oh, I think the first day I came back from teaching the kids live, my daughter, when I walked in, said, "Dad, you look so much better."
Ah,
Well, that more or less said what it's like.
good for
I have
you.
whole-
Good for you.
Because of my heart medicine, I have people, my fellow faculty, helping me drive back and forth for classes, and so I have an awful lot of help, and it's just been wonderful to be back. I can't get over how grateful I am to be back and not on Zoom. Although I must say that our Zooms aren't as awful as the class Zooms, where you can't really see the expressions in people's eyes.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
here we get a pretty good picture of reaction. lessons. And it's true even when we have an expanded group.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, one of the things that impresses me is that everybody seems to take to at least the basic concepts of presenting a good image on Zoom. You know, sometimes it's kind of important to be looking at yourself and say, you know, well, can I tweak it? Can I look a little bit differently? Should I turn off the video or whatever? But you know, I think we've got a good looking group here,
I'd say so.
without exception.
Yeah, me too.
And maybe what we've done in the last 2 hours, some of the folks who are not with us today might enjoy also. So
I hope they send emails and
Yeah.
give us some feedback in that regard.
that will be good. That will
Yes.
be Good. So we ask all of you who are not watching live to do so. If you have persevered for the 2 hours up to this point, let the rest of us know.
Good call.
Yeah.
Uh,
Shall we bid
Fred,
farewell?
next semester, will you be free on Fridays?
I don't think so.
Um,
I'm sorry to say.
Oh, well,
So is this the last time until around Christmas?
I guess so, yes.
Okay,
Christmas, we can do it.
well, we'll look forward to having you back on.
And
Around
your emails are much appreciated.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
everybody.
So God bless you
God
all
bless. Bye-bye.
and have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.